So, what if the most unsettling, terrifying place on Earth isn't actually a war zone?
Oh, wow, right.
Yeah, what if it's, a brightly lit suburban kitchen with the smell of fresh coffee brewing and the sound of a plastic bread wrapper just crinkling on the counter? Today, our mission is to unpack a really deeply unsettling sequence in Jason Matherson's recovery. We're looking at a space where the comforting illusion of, domestic normalcy doesn't just crack under the weight of trauma, it completely and violently shatters.
It really is the absolute definition of psychological whiplash.
Hmm.
I mean, you have this pristine veneer of a quiet life, the sandwich making, the morning paper, the
Yeah,
sunlight.
the normal stuff.
Exactly. But beneath it, the foundational floorboards are just completely rotting away.
Yeah.
And the sheer effort required to pretend the floor is solid
Yeah.
well, it's what makes this entire sequence so incredibly tense.
Right. And that tension is exactly where we are taking you today. Our source material focuses on a very specific, pivotal morning. Jason is finally awake. He is walking.
Huge milestone.
Massive. And he's trying to exist in what should be a completely normal morning routine with his mother, Gloria. But beneath the surface of this mundane lunch prep lies just a terrifying abyss of trauma, unspoken truths, and literal ghosts haunting the hallways of their home.
Part 6. Lunch was fun. Jason helped his mother make his sandwich, or rather, just got in her way. She didn't seem to mind since Jason was up and walking. He supported himself on the kitchen counter and tried to pull bread out of the wrapper. She held the bag open until he could get 2 slices out. She said, "Taking the day off from the club." "Club? You still play cards downtown, Mom?" "Same old ladies as always. You know, Peggy Ramsey, Joanne." Jason looked at his mother's face and saw age, worry, and decay. This woman was broken down. He hated to think that, but she looked exhausted. Gloria smiled at Jason. Her eyes projected happiness even though they lied. Her pain showed in her eyes. The Mathersons always had their eyes to give them away. "You mustn't give them up for me." She waved this off with her hand. "Nobody means more to me than you, son. Now that..." She looked back to the sandwich, obviously taken back by her own bad memories. "I'm alone." "Is it Dad?" "Please, if it is, then you have to tell me." She pushed away from the counter and took Jason's lunch to the kitchen table. She was weeping and said softly, "I think you know what happened to your father." "Did he finally file for divorce?" She nodded. Jason walked carefully to join her at the table. Her eyes were swollen with tears. She explained, "He came here right after you got home, brought the papers himself. I took him in to see you and he took your hand. He spoke to you. He spent a few hours with you, talking and touching you. When I gave you your injection, your father wanted to help too. I thought," she coughed through tears, "he would change his mind after seeing you. He really cared for you. I knew that. But he was already done with our marriage. He was unable to come back." Wow. "Jason, he loves you. He was in there shouting from the top of his lungs. He tried to tell you, but I guess you never heard him. You didn't even know he was here." She touched Jason's hand. "Oh, he left something for you in the nightstand." Jason's heart leapt. He rose and moved quickly into the room. He sat on the side of the bed, looking down at the nightstand drawer. He was immediately frozen, guilty for wanting to open it. As if he were a little kid. How silly. Just open it. Jason pulled the drawer open and saw the glimmering of a pair of reading glasses. His trembling hand pulled the glasses out. He wanted to put them on, but couldn't work his left hand. Instead, he put the glasses in his lap and flipped the earpieces up with his good hand. Gloria entered the room quietly, recognizing the glasses. Jason put the glasses on. Your father put those on you when he was here. He knew you always loved to play with those. He told me, wouldn't it be great if Jason would wake up wearing those? But you didn't move when he did. He stayed around as long as he could, but you didn't wake. The glasses belonged to his father, but seemed to clear Jason's vision. He was able to see the pain in his mother's face that much clearer. I can actually see. Take a look, she gestured to the bathroom down the hall. Jason first glimpsed himself in the mirror. His shabby face reminded him that his body and spirit were still lost. He saw his father's face in the mirror too. Jason wondered how he was doing. You're stronger, Jason. So much further to go, but you are ready to rise again. A chill passed up his spine. Rise again? He juggled those words. Rise again from the dead? Gloria was overcome by sobs and rushed out of the room, through the kitchen, then out the back door. Jason could see her through the bathroom window, running across the backyard to the fence, where she stopped and wept into her hands. Jason knew she wanted to be left alone. I'm sorry for all the trouble, he thought, and then returned the glasses to the nightstand. Part 7. Jason paged through the morning paper, taking in all the news about Iraq and the progress being made. He knows how the articles seem to be a little light when compared to the actual events. One writer suggested that there was a roadside bomb that killed 4 Shiite Muslims and 3 U.S. Army troops in Baghdad. Jason shook his head, thinking about the many other roadside bombs he had encountered, where the victims were not just killed, they were ripped to pieces. The image of flying tissue and shredded clothing intermixed with the smell of fire and hot flesh. The percussion from the explosion hit you first, then the smell, and then the realization that lives were just taken. Whether a civilian or a soldier, there was life lost in that split second, and each one Jason witnessed made him cry openly for the wasted life. Where is that story? I think they keep the public in the dark. He sipped at his coffee with his mother. On one side, it makes sense to keep the public thinking the war is something that happens. But to keep them from knowing it's actually something we made happen is fucking amazing. Jason! Sorry. No, you remember something. Jason looked up at her with wide eyes. Of all things to remember. It's important to look back on this. What happened there? Tell me more about the bombings. I would rather not. I lost a lot of buddies while I was there. In fact, I stopped caring about other people because I knew I would lose them. Everyone does this. They make bonds with the guys, but deep inside there's no feeling behind it. The bonds are more about safety. You need friends you can trust in a skirmish, but you don't want to freak out when one of them gets blown away. Jason's mom cringed, but encouraged him to continue. I connected with a bunch of the guys, but it just made it harder when things got... He paused and sipped at his coffee. His mom wanted to know more. When mental exercises produce results like these, they were indicators of healing. She waited for him to speak again. Mom, there was a lot of blood. People have no idea what death is. We go through our lives knowing there is death in the world, but we usually never see it happen. Only a few people even get to see death take someone. Jason gestured to the front of the house and recalled, I was 5 or 6 when our cat Max ran into the street and got killed in front of the house. He just walked from the porch right into traffic. He never looked for cars, just kept staring forward. I remember you ran into my bedroom, crying that Max was run down. I was terrified. He was hit so fast that his fat body flew apart. But I never forgot how Max acted right before he died. He looked like he knew it was going to happen. All he had to do was walk into traffic and let the car take him. Jason! Hold on. My point was that I used to cry about death. Then I saw it happen to a man. A car raced along a city street in Baghdad, packed with explosives, and cut through an alley to the main street, where a group of soldiers was waiting to cross the street. One soldier stepped out from the group and into the street. He just stared straight ahead without looking around. Just like Max, he never looked around. The car swerved but hit the soldier with such force his legs broke and he got pinned under the front wheel. Jason's mom gasped and moved her hand to her mouth. The car jerked back onto the road and drove directly through the front of a grocery store. The entire car went inside with the soldier still crying out for help. The men ran towards the hole in the wall and the car exploded. The front of the store blew off and the remains of the driver and the soldier were thrown everywhere. I remember the smells. It was a terrorist heading for the French embassy, which was right up the street. His car was filled with explosives. Oh, Jason. It was shocking. The guys running around trying to take control of the situation. Some ran into the store to pull survivors out and victims. They pulled the remains of the soldier out from under the car. Just a pair of legs. Christ. The men picked up the pieces and laid them out for the local doctors to examine, so people could claim their loved ones, or so the press could take their pictures. They didn't want to hide the death. They put it out there for everyone to see and mourn. Jason's mom nodded in understanding. When the scene was secure again, the men were interviewed by the army and released. We just continued on our walk and our conversations picked up where we left off. Even the guys who knew the dead soldier personally walked on with the group. Some silent, but some were laughing and carrying on like the accident never took place. Jason sipped at his coffee again and watched his mom wipe her eyes. She said, "They were in shock. No, they just didn't care anymore." After a moment, he recalled, "There was this one guy I knew of. He walked directly into the path of a tank. They managed to stop it before he got killed, but he didn't even seem fazed by it." Jason's mom had no idea this happened. The worst one I can remember was a new guy from Russia. He was marching across a bridge over the Euphrates with his unit and kept glancing down at the water. His buddies were joking that he was afraid of heights, but he wasn't scared. He was curious how high they were. He slipped off his pack and headed right for the rail. Without a word, he went right over the rail and plunged into the river. His body was recovered about 2 miles downstream. Oh. Something in our brain tells us when the experience is just too much. People just snap and put themselves in danger, hoping to die. It's like unconscious suicide. Did you ever want to die, Jason? Only after I came back.
Okay, let's unpack this. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So we really have to start in that kitchen, because the kitchen is universally recognized as, the ultimate symbol of domestic safety.
Right, it's the hearth.
Yeah, it's nourishment. It's where families gather to ground themselves after a long day. And the author deliberately places us right there, in the middle of this completely mundane lunch preparation, which just makes the underlying emotional decay feel so incredibly jarring.
It really does.
Like, Jason is up, he's supporting his weight on the counter, and he's trying to help his mom make a sandwich. but he's struggling just to pull the bread out of the wrapper.
And that physical struggle with the bread wrapper is, I mean, it's a masterclass in visual storytelling.
Totally.
Because here is a highly trained combat veteran, a man whose body was conditioned to survive the chaotic horrors of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
And he's struggling with the absolute most basic mechanics of making a sandwich.
Right.
But observe Gloria's reaction. She's just holding the bag open for him. She doesn't seem to mind the delay or the clumsiness.
Not at all.
Because for her, the simple fact that he is standing upright and interacting with an object is just a profound miracle. I mean, it's the singular miracle she's been praying for during the 2 agonizing years he was locked inside a coma.
Yeah, she is trying so desperately hard to project this aura of a triumphant return to normalcy. She even casually mentions to Jason, taking the day off from the club.
Right, the card club.
Yeah, and Jason is genuinely surprised by this. He asks Club, "You still play cards downtown, Mom?" And she casually lists off the same old ladies as always, Peggy Ramsey, Joanne. It feels like this desperate, almost theatrical attempt to signal to Jason that the world hasn't stopped turning, that she hasn't stopped living her life while he was suspended in time.
What's fascinating here is the psychological toll on caregivers that this brief, seemingly innocent exchange reveals.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Gloria's dropping these names. Peggy, Joanne as anchors to a reality she almost certainly hasn't truly participated in for years.
Right. She's been at the hospital.
Exactly. The text informs us she practically lived there, sitting by his comatose body day and night, essentially freezing her own life to keep watch over his. So the idea of her casually playing cards with Peggy and Joanne is a complete facade.
A total performance.
Yes, a performance of wellness, a stage play constructed entirely for Jason's benefit to prevent him from feeling like a burden.
But the thing is, Jason sees right through the performance instantly. The text is brutal in its honesty here. Jason looks at his mother's face and he doesn't see relief. He doesn't see joy or maternal triumph.
No, not at all.
He sees, and I quote, age, worry, and decay. The source material literally says this woman was broken down. It notes that her eyes project happiness, but they lie. And this is where they introduce that concept, the Matherson eyes. The text says, the Mathersons always had their eyes to give them away.
And that concept of the Matherson eyes is crucial to understanding the deeply entrenched dynamics of this family.
Right.
It introduces the idea that trauma and truth are inextricably shared within this bloodline. Like they share a specific physiological tell.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, you could think of it in terms of microexpressions, those involuntary facial movements that reveal true emotions before the conscious brain can mask them.
Like a split-second thing.
Exactly. No matter how hard Gloria tries to project this bright, sunny, sandwich-making optimism, her eyes are betraying the profound, agonizing pain she has endured.
Wow.
And because of this shared genetic trait, it is fundamentally impossible for them to hide their true pain from one another.
It creates an effect, it's really similar to the emotional uncanny valley.
Ooh, I like that comparison.
Right. You know that concept in robotics where something looks almost entirely human, but there's a slight, imperceptible flaw that makes your brain scream that something is terribly inherently wrong?
Yeah, it gives you that creepy feeling.
Exactly. That's what Jason is experiencing while looking at his own mother. He looks at someone he deeply loves. Her smile is perfectly placed. Her tone is light. She's talking about mundane card clubs, but her eyes are absolutely screaming in agony.
It's chilling.
It really creates such a profound sense of isolation for you as the listener, and obviously for Jason. The realization hits that they are both trapped in this room, playing characters for each other.
If you put yourself in Gloria's shoes for a moment, consider the absolute bone-deep exhaustion of maintaining that facade.
I can't even imagine.
For 2 years, she lived in a state of perpetual hyperarousal. Her sympathetic nervous system was flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. Every single beep of the hospital monitor, every hushed conversation with the neurologist was literally a matter of life and death. Now, her son is finally awake, and the societal expectation is that she should be overjoyed.
Like problem solved, right?
Exactly. But human neurobiology doesn't work that way. It's like a marathon runner who collapses the moment they cross the finish line.
Right.
When the acute crisis technically ends, that is precisely when the true crushing weight of the trauma catches up to the caregiver. She is described as broken down because her biological and emotional reserves are entirely, completely depleted.
And because Jason is just waking up to this reality, his returning awareness makes him hyper-perceptive to this hidden decay.
Yes, he's seeing it with fresh eyes.
He was in a coma, effectively dead to the world, and now he's returned. But he hasn't returned to the safe harbor he thought he left behind. He has returned to a shipwreck.
That's a great way to put it.
He tells her, "You mustn't give them up for me," referring to her friends at the card club, and she waves it off, claiming nobody means more to her than him. But then she looks back at the sandwich on the counter. She gets taken aback by her own dark memories, and she whispers, "I'm alone."
That whispered admission, "I'm alone," is the first structural crack in the dam.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. She tries so hard to build this fortress of normalcy with the bread wrapper and the stories of the card club, and it falls apart in less than a minute of genuine conversation.
Because the truth is just too heavy.
Because the stark truth is, the trauma of the last 2 years didn't just break Jason's body. It systematically dismantled her entire world, isolating her from everyone and everything she used to know.
And Jason's hyper-perception of his mother's pain doesn't let him just ignore that crack in the dam. He immediately suspects the underlying source of her isolation.
He knows where to look.
Right. He asks the question that shifts the entire atmosphere of the house, moving us from the physical decay of the caregiver in the kitchen to the emotional abandonment haunting the property. He asks, "Is it Dad? Please, if it is, then you have to tell me."
And this is the moment the domestic illusion shatters completely.
Yeah, it's gone.
Gloria pushes away from the counter, takes a lunch to the table, and simply begins to weep. The performance is over. Jason asks if his father finally filed for divorce, and she just nods.
The details she reveals to Jason here are incredibly difficult to process. She explains that the father came to the house right after Jason was initially brought home from the hospital.
Right.
He brought the divorce papers himself. And then she took him into the bedroom to see Jason, who was, we have to remember, completely and utterly comatose at this point.
Unconscious.
Completely. And the father took his son's hand. He spoke to him. He spent a few hours talking to him and touching him while Jason was locked deep in the silent darkness of his coma.
Gloria admits she thought this visit would be a turning point.
Right, like a movie moment.
Exactly. She thought that physically seeing Jason in that state would change his mind, that it would awaken some dormant paternal instinct. But then she reveals the devastating reality. He was already done with our marriage. He was unable to come back.
I really have to pause here and challenge the father's actions, especially with the detail that follows.
Go for it.
Because she tells Jason he was in there shouting from the top of his lungs. He tried to tell you, but I guess you never heard him. You didn't even know he was here.
It's so intense.
Right, but let's look at this critically. Was this visit really an act of love for Jason, or was this the ultimate cowardly act of closure for the father himself?
Oh, that's a sharp read.
Think about the mechanics of what he's doing. He goes into a room with a comatose man. He speaks to someone who cannot respond, cannot judge him, cannot argue back, cannot express disappointment.
Captive audience.
Yes,
Yeah.
and he screams at the top of his lungs. It feels incredibly manipulative to me. He used a comatose man as an emotional punching bag because it is infinitely easier than facing a conscious, awake son with the reality of his own abandonment.
That is a very sharp psychological read. It is a profound manifestation of cowardice masking as therapeutic closure.
Masking, exactly.
If we look at the behavioral psychology of the father's actions, he is actively unburdening his own guilt onto a blank slate. He gets to perform the role of the deeply grieving, loving father, holding the hand, shedding the tears, shouting his pain into the void, without having to do the actual grueling day-to-day work of staying and supporting his broken family.
It's incredibly selfish.
But we also have to unpack the profound tragedy of timing in that room. The father was emotionally screaming, unleashing his entire emotional payload in a room where Jason was locked in literal, impenetrable silence.
It's a terrifying parallel. We know from the wider context of the source that Jason's internal monologue during the coma was just this endless, maddening darkness.
Yes.
And right there, sitting inches from his bed, his father was experiencing his own kind of maddening emotional breakdown. You have two men inches apart in physical space, but separated by a universe of consciousness, completely unable to reach each other.
It perfectly illustrates the concept of ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is a psychological term for a type of grief that occurs when there is no closure, no clear ending, and no physical finality.
Okay, I see.
The father was mourning a son who is physically breathing in the bed, but mentally and cognitively gone. It's a type of grief that freezes people in place because society simply doesn't have rituals for mourning someone who is still alive.
That makes a lot of sense.
But now, the deeply tragic inversion has happened. Jason has woken up. His mind has returned, only to find that his father is physically gone, but emotionally haunting the space. The father has now become the source of ambiguous loss for Jason and Gloria.
Emotionally haunting the space that captures the feeling perfectly. And that haunting isn't just an abstract feeling, right? The father's physical absence leaves behind literal physical artifacts that carry immense psychological weight.
They absolutely do.
Seeking a baseline, a way to process this new reality, Jason moves from the shared space of the kitchen to the deeply intimate space of the bedroom. Gloria touches his hand and tells him he left something for you in the nightstand.
The spatial transition here is highly significant.
How so?
The kitchen was the shared space where they attempted to construct their daytime facade. The bedroom is the private space of the subconscious, of sleep, of vulnerability, and of the coma itself. It is where Jason is most defenseless against his own mind.
Man, that's heavy. So Jason goes into the room, sits on the edge of the bed, and looks down at the nightstand drawer. And the text notes a reaction that is so incredibly specific.
Yeah, his hesitation.
Exactly. It says he was immediately frozen, guilty for wanting to open it, as if he were a little kid.
Right.
I mean, this is a highly trained soldier. This is a man who has witnessed and survived the absolute worst of human warfare, sitting in his quiet childhood home, feeling the visceral, paralyzing guilt of opening his parents' private drawer.
What you're observing there is psychological regression, which is incredibly common in trauma survivors and patients recovering from severe, prolonged medical episodes.
Psychological regression.
Yes. Jason has been entirely stripped of his bodily autonomy for 2 years. He has been bathed, fed, clothed, and moved by other people.
He's been totally dependent.
Exactly. So sitting there, looking at that drawer, his adult defenses crumble, and he reverts to the emotional state of a child confronting the boundary of parental privacy. It highlights just how much of his adult identity, his agency as a soldier and a man, has been eroded by his injuries and the coma.
He manages to pull the drawer open and finds a pair of his father's reading glasses.
The artifact.
The artifact. He puts them in his lap, flipping the earpieces up with his one good hand because, remember, his left hand is entirely paralyzed. Gloria comes into the room and explains the history behind them. His father put those exact glasses on Jason's comatose face when he visited.
Yeah, that detail.
He told Gloria, wouldn't it be great if Jason would wake up wearing those? He knew Jason loved to play with them as a little boy.
The father is grasping desperately at nostalgia here.
Yeah, trying to go back in time.
He's trying to summon the ghost of the little boy who used to play with his glasses, effectively trying to overwrite the reality of the broken, comatose soldier lying in the bed. He stayed as long as he could, hoping the physical artifact would act as some sort of magical talisman to wake his son.
But of course, the magic didn't work. The reality of the brain injury remained.
Right.
But when Jason finally puts those glasses on now, fully awake, here's where it gets really interesting. The glasses obviously belong to his father, but the text specifically notes that they seem to clear Jason's vision. He was able to see the pain in his mother's face that much clearer.
Such a powerful moment.
It's a brilliant, devastating metaphor. It reminds me of putting on a brand new, much stronger prescription for the first time.
Oh yeah, when everything is suddenly sharp.
Right. You put them on and suddenly you look around your house and see all the dust, all the cobwebs in the corners, all the tiny jagged cracks in the paint that your previously blurred vision allowed you to happily ignore. The absolute clarity the glasses provide isn't a blessing at all. It's a terrifying curse.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of the scene. The glasses act as a literal and metaphorical conduit for his father's perspective.
Wow, yeah.
By putting on the father's glasses, Jason is assuming the father's lens on the world, and what he sees through that lens is the undeniable, microscopic, suffocating reality of his mother's devastation. The soft, protective blur of his recovering, still healing brain is instantly stripped away.
It's all just raw data now.
Yes, he says out loud, I can actually see. But what he is forced to see is emotionally unbearable.
The clarity becomes too much, so Gloria tells him to go look in the bathroom mirror. Jason walks down the hall, looks into the mirror, and the physical reality of his trauma hits him like a freight train.
He really sees himself for the first time.
He sees his shabby face, a face that serves as a visceral reminder that his body and spirit were still lost. But the reflection doesn't stop there. The trauma triggers a hallucination.
The very significant one.
He sees his father's face superimposed in the mirror alongside his own. And he hears his father's voice speak to him, saying, "You're stronger, Jason. So much further to go, but you are ready to rise again."
And Jason feels a profound chill pass up his spine at that. He juggles those specific words in his mind, rise again.
Yeah.
And then the horrifying realization of what that actually implies hits him, rise again from the dead.
It's a moment that stops you cold. Like, is this a moment of profound spiritual awakening, a message echoing from beyond the veil of his coma? Or is this the manifestation of a severe trauma-induced psychological break?
It could be either, or a mix of both.
The contrast within his own mind is staggering. Just minutes ago, he was feeling guilty like a little kid looking at a nightstand, and now he's standing under the harsh fluorescent light of a bathroom mirror, being burdened with the heavy biblical weight of his own resurrection.
It's a massive shift.
She realizes he didn't just wake up. He was effectively dead, and now he has to carry the crushing weight of having returned from the grave.
The phrasing rise again from the dead carries an immense, almost suffocating psychological pressure.
I can imagine.
If you survive something that by all medical and logical metrics should have killed you, something that effectively did kill your conscious mind for 2 years, the survivor's guilt you carry is astronomical.
You're not just a guy anymore.
Exactly. You are no longer allowed to just be a flawed, normal person. You are a living miracle. And a miracle is an impossibly heavy thing to be, especially when you realize that your survival didn't save your family. Your family fell apart during your absence.
Right.
The hallucination of the father in the mirror is Jason's subconscious mind externalizing the crushing pressure he feels to not just recover physically, but to justify his own survival to a world that moved on without him.
And the immediate aftermath of this realization is physically devastating. Gloria, who has been watching him process this, is completely overcome.
The dam breaks.
The dam finally breaks. She rushes out of the room, through the kitchen, and bolts out the back door. Jason watches her through the small bathroom window. He watches his mother run frantically across the backyard until she hits the fence, where she stops, grabs it, and just weeps uncontrollable into her hands.
That physical flight to the fence represents the ultimate, undeniable breaking point of her carefully constructed facade.
She couldn't hold it anymore.
Not for another second.
Yeah.
The fence is highly symbolic. It represents the physical boundary of her property, the absolute hard edge of her controlled environment. She runs as far away from the house, from the echoes of her husband, from the terrifying miracle of her son, as she physically can without leaving her property and abandoning him entirely.
It's like she needs to escape the air in the house.
It is a deeply visceral, animalistic need for air, for space, away from the suffocating, toxic reality of what their lives have actually become. And notice Jason's internal reaction.
Oh, yeah.
He just thinks, I'm sorry for all the trouble, and silently puts the glasses back in the nightstand. The guilt is instantaneous and absolute.
It's heartbreaking. He feels like a toxic burden simply for existing, simply for the act of waking up.
Yeah.
So Jason can't handle the suffocating, microscopic clarity of the house anymore. He needs a baseline. He needs to know what the real world outside this house looks like. So he turns to the morning newspaper, hoping to connect with the reality of the Iraq war he left behind.
Seeking some sort of validation.
Right. But instead of the truth, he finds another facade. He finds that the outside world is deliberately blurring the truth just as much as his mother was in the kitchen.
He's actively looking for external validation of his internal trauma in the public record. He wants proof that the nightmare he survived was real.
Yeah.
But what he finds in the newspaper is a sterile, heavily sanitized version of events that completely invalidates his memory.
Jason reads an article about the supposed progress being made in Iraq, and the writer casually, almost breezily, mentions that a roadside bomb killed 4 Shiite Muslims and 3 U.S. Army troops in Baghdad.
Just a footnote.
That's it, just a single sentence, a sterile statistic neatly packaged between advertisements. And Jason is utterly disgusted by how light the article reads compared to the staggering gravity of the actual events.
The cognitive disconnect between the passive language of the newspaper and the active language of trauma is vast. The newspaper utilizes the clean, bureaucratic language of statistics. A roadside bomb that killed it implies a clean, instant transaction from life to death.
It completely sanitizes it.
It removes the human agony entirely from the equation.
But Jason's brain won't let him accept the clean transaction. His memory floods back to violently correct the record. He remembers the other roadside bombs he witnessed.
The real ones.
The victims weren't just neatly killed. He notes with horrific clarity that they were ripped to pieces. And the sensory details the source material provides here are incredibly vivid. It's not just a visual memory playing like a movie. It is a full overwhelming sensory assault. He remembers the flying tissue and the shredded clothing intermixed with the inescapable smell of fire and hot flesh.
Notice the very specific chronology of the sensory input the text describes here.
Yeah, he breaks it down.
Jason notes that the percussion from the explosion hits you first, then the smell of the fire and flesh. And then, only after the physical senses are overwhelmed, comes the cognitive realization that lives were just permanently erased.
Wow.
This is exactly how the human brain encodes traumatic memory. It doesn't file it away as a neat chronological story in the prefrontal cortex. It brings it into the amygdala as raw sensory data, sound, smell, pressure.
So the body feels it first.
The physical impact precedes the cognitive understanding. The shockwave literally hits the nervous system before the mind can even begin to process the horror.
And Jason processes that horror with deep empathy. He says that whether it was a civilian on the street or a soldier in uniform, there was a universe of life lost in that split second. And each one he witnessed made him cry openly for the wasted life.
He felt all of it.
Every bit of it. He sits there in his quiet Denver kitchen with his coffee, reading this sterile one-sentence blurb, and he asks his mother a question born of pure frustration. Where is that story? Now, before we dive into his reaction to this, it is critical we frame this correctly for everyone listening.
Yes, absolutely. We need to be clear that we are entirely focused on Jason's psychological reality here.
Right. I want to stress this to you guys listening. We aren't here to debate the geopolitical merits or failures of the Iraq War.
Exactly.
Nor are we validating or endorsing a specific political ideology on the left or the right. Our lens today is strictly psychological. We are impartially analyzing why this specific disconnect between his lived, visceral memory and the sanitized media narrative completely shatters his grip on reality and makes him feel utterly alienated from his own country.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, from a purely psychological standpoint, Jason's anger here isn't rooted in a political debate. It's rooted in the profound erasure of his suffering and the suffering of the men he watched die.
Yeah, that erasure is key.
When a society sanitizes the reality of war for mass consumption, it inadvertently but deeply isolates the veterans who actually fought it.
They feel gaslit almost.
Exactly. Jason feels that if the public truly understood the raw sensory horror, the flying tissue, the concussive force, the smell of burning flesh, they wouldn't be able to consume it so casually with their morning coffee and toast. By reducing the chaotic horror of war to a sterile statistic, the newspaper renders his life-altering trauma completely invisible.
And that enforced invisibility forces Jason to internalize his experiences. His mother, returning to the house and hearing his rising anger, actually encourages him to keep talking. She tells him, "Tell me more about the bombings."
She thinks she's helping.
Because for her, leaning on conventional civilian wisdom, these mental exercises bringing these dark memories up to the surface are positive indicators of healing.
Which is a very common, though often severely misguided, civilian approach to processing trauma. We are taught that talking about it automatically equals healing. It's the whole get it off your chest theory.
Right, like venting.
But Gloria has absolutely no framework for what she is asking him to unpack. She thinks she's asking him to recount a bad memory. She doesn't realize she's asking him to reopen a psychological wound that fundamentally altered his brain chemistry.
And by pushing him, she ironically forces Jason to explain why his version of healing looks so much like total, terrifying apathy. Jason initially tries to protect her from it. He resists.
He doesn't want to go there.
He says he'd rather not talk about it because he lost a lot of buddies. But then he admits, point blank, a truth that must terrify a mother to hear. In fact, I stopped caring about other people because I knew I would lose them.
This is a textbook, visceral description of emotional numbing, which is a primary, deeply ingrained symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Let's walk through the mechanics of why that happens.
Sure. The human brain simply cannot sustain the level of profound grief Jason described earlier, crying openly for every simple wasted life in a war zone.
It would just break you.
It is too metabolically and psychologically expensive. It would lead to total systemic failure. So the brain does what it is designed to do. It survives. It throws a physiological circuit breaker. It actively downregulates the amygdala and shuts down the capacity for deep emotional attachment as a necessary primal survival mechanism.
Jason explains the brutal, necessary calculus of battlefield friendships. He says everyone does it. You make bonds with the guys in your unit, but deep inside there's no actual feeling behind it.
Right, it's transactional.
The bonds are strictly, mathematically about safety. You need friends you can trust with your life in a firefight, but you absolutely cannot afford the luxury of freaking out when one of them gets blown away.
The phrase, "there's no feeling behind it," sounds chilling to a civilian ear. But it is absolutely essential for sustained combat survival.
Because if you panic, you're dead.
If you are paralyzed by grief when a member of your unit is killed, you become an immediate liability to yourself and the rest of your team. The bond must become purely functional rather than emotional. But the underlying tragedy of this adaptation is that you cannot simply flip that circuit breaker back on when you return to a quiet kitchen in Denver. The brain has been rewired to view emotional attachment as a fatal vulnerability.
To force his mother to truly understand the reality of death in that environment, Jason uses an analogy from his own childhood that is just, it's haunting to read.
The cat Max.
Yeah, he talks about their old childhood cat, Max. He reminds his mom that when he was 5 or 6 years old, Max ran into the busy street in front of their house and was killed, but Jason makes it clear that it's how Max died that burned itself into his memory.
He specifically notes the behavioral mechanics of the cat's death. He says the cat didn't accidentally wander into traffic because it was distracted.
Right.
He says Max just walked straight from the porch right into the middle of the street, staring straight forward, deliberately never looking left or right for cars. Jason says before he died, he looked like he knew it was going to happen. All he had to do was walk in traffic and let the car take him.
And Jason uses this deeply unsettling memory of a domestic pet's death to explain the unfathomable reality of human death in Baghdad. He compares the cat Max to a soldier he witnessed during a massive terrorist attack aimed at the French embassy.
The parallel is striking.
Jason paints the scene for his mother. A car packed tightly with explosives is racing erratically along a crowded city street. Everyone knows what it is. And then a soldier steps out from a group waiting across the street.
And pay very close attention to the behavioral parallel Jason draws here. He says the soldier stepped into the street and just stared straight ahead without looking around. Just like Max, he never looked around.
The violence that immediately follows is described with shocking, unrelenting brutality. The speeding car hits the soldier with such immense force it instantly breaks his legs, pins his body under the front wheel, drives directly through the glass front of a grocery store, and then the entire car detonates.
It's just massive destruction.
The front of the store blows completely off. The remains of the building and the people inside are thrown everywhere. And Jason explicitly notes the horrific aftermath. They pulled the remains of the soldier out from under the car. Just a pair of legs.
It is an incomprehensible, world-shattering level of violence. But the core concept Jason is introducing to his mother here requires deep analysis. He is describing a phenomenon he refers to as unconscious suicide.
Unconscious suicide.
Yes. This soldier, exactly like Max the cat, simply walked directly into the path of inevitable destruction. It wasn't a tactical error. It wasn't an accident. It was the human brain and body completely surrendering to the inevitability of the violence surrounding them. It's an ultimate surrender to the environment.
Let me pause you there and challenge that interpretation based on what the text says about their emotional state.
Okay, sure.
Is Jason describing true, literal apathy? Does this soldier truly not care whether he lives or dies? Or is this the absolute final limit of that psychological defense mechanism we talked about? Like, if they actually process the horror of what is barreling toward them, their mind breaks completely. So they just walk into it, almost hypnotized.
It's the latter, absolutely. It is the absolute total exhaustion of the human survival instinct. You can only maintain that hypervigilant, adrenaline-fueled state of survival for so long before the nervous system just gives up.
It just shuts down.
Jason actually reinforces this concept by mentioning another story about a Russian soldier. He describes a man who, while simply marching across a bridge over the Euphrates River, slipped off his heavy pack, went right over the rail, and plunged into the deep water without uttering a single word.
Wow, just like that.
Jason concludes, something in our brain tells us when the experience is just too much. People just snap and put themselves in danger, hoping to die. The sheer, crushing psychological weight of surviving minute by minute, hour by hour in a war zone eventually crushes the primal will to live. Death stops being a fear and becomes the path of least resistance.
And the immediate aftermath of the grocery store bombing highlights the profound cultural divide in how human beings process that kind of death. Jason describes how the local Iraqi doctors handled the remains of the soldier, the pair of legs.
Right.
They carefully picked up the pieces and laid them out on tables for the doctors to examine. They laid them out so people could publicly claim their loved ones, or so the press could come and take unfiltered pictures.
Jason says they didn't want to hide the death. They put it out there for everyone to see and mourn. This is in direct, glaring contrast to the sanitized, one-sentence American newspaper statistic we discussed just a few minutes ago.
It's completely opposite.
In Baghdad, the reality of death is visceral. It is undeniably public, and it demands to be seen. In Denver, death is a sanitized inconvenience tucked away on page 4.
And how did the surviving American soldiers react to the grocery store bombing? Jason says they were briefly interviewed by the army brass and then released, and then they just continued on their walk.
Like nothing happened.
Their conversations picked up exactly where they left off before the explosion. Jason tells his mother, even the guys who knew the dead soldier personally walked on with the group, some silent, but some were laughing and carrying on like the accident never took place.
Yeah.
Gloria tries desperately to rationalize this behavior. She says they were in shock, but Jason shuts that down immediately. He corrects her, no, they just didn't care anymore.
The laughter is arguably the most disturbing part for a civilian mind to comprehend. But it is a highly documented, deeply ingrained trauma response.
Really?
Laughter. When the horror surrounding you is so absolute, so absurdly violent that your brain cannot logically process it, laughter acts as an involuntary neurological release valve. It's not callousness or cruelty in the traditional sense. It is the chilling sound of a human mind that is completely and utterly detached from its emotional center just to survive the next 5 minutes of existence.
Which brings us to the devastating climax of this entire sequence. After hearing all of these unimaginable horrors, after sitting at her kitchen table listening to her son describe flying tissue, totally apathetic soldiers, and the unconscious suicide of walking into a car bomb, Gloria asks the question that has likely been burning in the back of her mind since the moment he opened his eyes.
The ultimate question.
She looks at him and asks, did you ever want to die, Jason?
It is the terrifying, incredibly brave question of a mother trying to measure the exact depth of her son's despair. She wants to know when the light went out.
And Jason's response is just, it completely takes the breath out of you. He doesn't say yes when I saw the bomb go off at the grocery store. He doesn't say yes when my friends were ripped apart. He looks at his mother in the safety of their brightly lit kitchen and says, only after I came back.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the tragic irony of that final statement is profound. The battlefield of Iraq was undeniably horrific. The violence was completely unimaginable.
Yes.
But his true, absolute descent into darkness, the true, overriding desire for his own death, didn't happen under enemy fire in the streets of Baghdad. It happened right here. It happened in the deafening, deeply isolating silence of returning to a normal life that simply no longer makes any logical sense to his rewired brain.
It's the peace that breaks him.
The physical trauma of war is terrible, but the deep psychological alienation of peace, of sitting in a quiet kitchen, reading a newspaper that blatantly lies to you, of putting on your absent father's reading glasses, only to see the broken, decayed face of your mother, that is what finally, truly broke his will to exist.
So what does this all mean for us? We started this deep dive talking about the facade of the kitchen, how usually when someone is hurt, we want an easy answer.
Right, a quick fix.
We want to look at an x-ray, point to the jagged white line of a broken bone and say, there is the injury, now we cast it, and now it heals. But Jason Matherson isn't carrying a broken bone. He is carrying a fundamentally broken reality.
Exactly.
The x-ray machine of civilian life simply cannot capture the invisible shrapnel embedded in his mind. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
What is it?
If returning to safety to the quiet suburban kitchen, the mundane sandwich preparation, the morning paper is what truly broke Jason's will to live, how do we as a society need to redefine what it actually means to bring our soldiers home?
It's a huge question.
Are we simply putting them on a transport plane and rescuing them from a physical war zone, only to abandon them on their own front porches in a silent psychological war, where the primary enemy is their own memory, where the battlefield is their childhood bedroom, and the casualties are their relationships with the people who love them the most?
Wow.
Keep questioning the tidy narratives you read, and always look closely at the complex, sometimes painful realities lurking just beneath the surface of the normal. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
This is Troy. I wanted to thank you for listening and hope that you tune in for my weekly presentation of In Darkness We Sleep. Vocals by Eric Neubauer and Troy St. James. Music and episode art provided by Robert McNichol. I can be contacted directly at troystjames@cox.net. This audio podcast is produced by Troy St. James, copyright 2012. Have a good night.